All right. So today or this afternoon, we're going to talk specifically about social media and the digital landscape. Now, I know that for many organisations, community organisations, as well as business in general, it's a whole new huge world when it comes to social and digital, and there's so much to learn and understand and to take in. So the process that we're going to go through today is just looking at some of the key channels that you can use, some of the pros and cons, some of the tips and tricks, and as I said, answering any questions that you've got about how to use social media and digital marketing for the benefit of your organisation. It does get very confusing when you're trying to figure out exactly where to spend your time and money. And I know that as community-based organisations, it really does come down to those finite resources. It's not as though you have a team of digital marketing experts who one can do social media, one can look after your website, one can do whatever else it is that you need to do. You're really trying to figure out how to spend your money and your time in the most effective way. And before we get started, I just thought I'd share a couple of stats with you around the use of digital marketing and online channels, so we can really understand why it's become so important. In Australia, more than 15 million active users jump onto Facebook and YouTube every month. It's absolutely phenomenal, the amount of people who go to those channels to research. Instagram sits at around 9 million, Snapchat 6.4 for those of you who have a younger audience, and LinkedIn at 4.5 million for professional B2B organisations. In terms of the use of mobile and digital platforms, around 89% of people recommend a brand after a positive experience on mobile. So that just means that whatever you're doing in your organisation, when you're putting information out, having it usable and user-friendly in a way that people can pick up a mobile device is absolutely critical these days. Voice queries are up 3,400% over the last 4 years, which really means people are jumping onto Siri and saying, find me the best event in Coffs Harbour, find me the next music event in Coffs Harbour. And the way that that then links into your digital and marketing strategy is that, have you got the right information up on your website? Have you shared that on social media? Is there a way for Google to pick up that information and send it back to the person who's asking the question? Everything is connected these days, and having everything sort of linked through and understanding why you need to have content updated to you on your website that links through to everything else you're doing is critical. In terms of search engines and how people search for things, Google still sits at 94.5% of the way people search. So really understanding how Google My Business, Google Analytics, Google Reviews works for your organization is still really important, because the stats sitting around people searching and then just purely looking at reviews and what people say about things, it's absolutely phenomenal. They'll take that over anything you've got on your website any day, because it's someone who's at an arm's length from your organization. So that's just an intro as to why we really do need to understand and navigate digital marketing. In terms of my background, I've been in business for many years. I have a Bachelor of Business and Communications, but what I've really learned over all of my years in business is how to leverage some of these platforms and technologies so that people find out about you, so that throughout the whole communication process, if someone's interested in something, they're able to find you. Once they're interested in that thing, you're giving them information so that they understand a little bit more about what you do, and then you're guiding them to make a decision, which really is the process of communication on any platform. In terms of digital marketing, it really is everything. So we're not just talking social media, and yes, it's become a really important part of how people find us and the way we go about advertising and connecting with people, but it's not everything. It encompasses search engines, email, websites, search engine optimization, and everything that goes on the internet. So once someone does put that ever important search criteria in, help me find something, how are they actually connecting to you? Yes, social media will play a huge role in that, the way those algorithms work, as does search engine optimization, but it's really understanding for your business, how does it all connect and what are the most important pieces for your organization. So the $1 million question, of course, is for social media, which social channels should you use, or should you use them at all? I know we were having a discussion in the room just now about if your target audience isn't on social media, then of course there's no point in spending a whole lot of time and energy and effort understanding how to use it. So I think really understanding who that person is and who your audience is critical. There's some great resources to help you understand which channels your target audience may use based on age and income and profession, etc. So if you have a look at the Pew Research Centre website, they have some really interesting stats on how to find people who are using particular channels. Why are you using, what are your objectives for social media? And I think once you also understand that, whether that's increasing brand awareness or trying to get new people to connect with your organization or just to share and educate, that will also help you understand what types of channels that you should use. Most importantly, particularly when it comes to community-based organizations, how can you best utilize the resources that you have? As we said, there are finite resources in many organizations. So really also having a practical look at how much time does somebody have, what skills do they have, what resources do we already have within our framework that we can use, and what's our budget? So if we don't have any budget, then we might make different decisions. If we have some budget to allocate to digital marketing, then we can say, okay, well, where is it best allocated? All of these things will come into play when you're deciding which channels to use. Then based on your objectives and the audience that you have, it's really important to understand what type of content that you want to create. So whether that's to inform, to educate, to inspire, whatever that may be, you really have to think about what type of information you want to get out there. It's all about understanding your brand, making sure that your brand personality really shines through and that you know what your key messages are. In terms of social media and often across digital media too, videos become a significant key player in the way people are able to understand and take in information these days. People are busy. People have gotten really used to getting information really quickly, really efficiently, and they often don't want to read. They're really happy to press play on something though. So if you can quite easily pop a video on that explains your message and it's under a minute and people can also read the little transcript underneath. All of these things you can do by yourself on a smartphone now. It's quite amazing, really. The amount of engagement and the amount of time people will spend on it is significantly more than a static image or just words. So I think that's also something really important to take into consideration when you're building out your content strategy. The other question that often comes up when I'm working with businesses of any size is how many channels should we engage in when we're talking about social media? There are so many, and once you consider, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, it goes on and on. Understanding your audience and then picking 2 to 3 is absolutely the magic number. Do them well and do them consistently. You don't need to do any more than those. If your audience, the people who you're trying to connect with, are in those channels and you do it consistently, the other thing is making sure the quality of your communication is really good. And so that includes things like branding and imagery, using really great images, and they may be ones that you take yourself, but it does make a difference, the type of image and quality of communication that you're putting out. These days, there's also some fantastic technology that can help to not only schedule, but to create video content, to help or coordinate and organize things in the background, things like Hootsuite, where you're able to forward schedule a month worth of content based on, the types of messages that you want to send out, and it will automatically send out for you. So using technology when you've got finite time and finite resource is a really great way to go. And I think start small, building week by week. So even if you started with one channel and you did that really well, and then you can move on to the next thing. It doesn't only mean social media, it might also mean that you're looking at building a database. So we're going to go into different types of digital marketing and digital communications in a moment, but I think picking the things that are really going to make a difference to your community organization and focusing on those one thing at a time is a great way to go. I think, you know, my last tip just in general is to get help. There are lots and lots of resources out there. I know through council, through places like the federal government entrepreneurship program, there's people out there who can help. So if you're trying to figure out how to manage this digital landscape on your own, you're really trying to pull together a plan and figure out what's the most important thing for you to do or where to start, reach out, and there's plenty of ways to do that. I think being professional is also something that we really need to take into consideration, and having a bit of a standard across an organisation so that anyone who's contributing to content, whether that's via email or on your website or via social media, understands what the business is trying to achieve and what the standards are. I think being respectful is always important, and because once it's out there, it is absolutely out there. So we're just going to jump in this next section and just have a bit of a talk about different types of digital marketing. As I mentioned, it's not all about social, and while social definitely can play an important part of reaching a target audience that you may not be able to reach with traditional types of communications, it can also become all-encompassing and take up a lot of your time. So if you are going to have a social media component, I think it needs to be really well planned. It needs to be really well structured so that someone, whoever it is within your organisation, can spend a small amount of time on that forward plan, create content and set it to the side. Because what we really want to do is to create a plan that makes sure that, as we said, people can find you easily. Once they find you, they can go to your website. Your website shares the right information that people need to know, that they can then join a database so that you can continue to communicate with them. And that's the other thing, I guess, around social media. You don't own that channel. They can change algorithms, as they often do, and suddenly if your post was showing up on someone's channel, they may not anymore. Whereas if you have an email database that you nurture and you look after and you communicate with well, they'll always remain and belong to you. So I think it's really important to think about that as part of your process. So content marketing. Content marketing is kind of the key to any sort of marketing that we're doing digitally. And in its simplest form, it really comes down to what are the types of information that the people who I'm communicating with want to hear? How can I add value to my customers or to my members or to the people who engage with our organisation so that they feel like they're a part of it, they understand what we're doing, and they really want to be involved? And it looks like lots of different things. You will have different skills within your organisations and different people who can contribute. So I think really understanding how you can use different types of content to reach your audience in different ways is a really important consideration. In terms of the great thing with content marketing, there's so many platforms you can use. You know, you can put content out in multiple ways. There's a really low barrier to entry, so anyone who has a great idea, who can speak well, who can write well, who can take great imagery, you've suddenly got lots of content that you can use in different ways. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's a great way to attract new prospects. So I think some great things about content marketing, if there's a particular topic or a particular something that's of interest to your audience, you can create pieces of content that will draw them to you. And I guess that's one of the ways that we can use things like social media to bring in new people who you might not have had an opportunity to talk to before. It's great for brand awareness and storytelling, and of course it will boost your search engine optimization. If you didn't get a chance to, I think, catch Kath Fowler's session as part of the Small Business Festival, jump on and have a look at that. I'm sure there'll be a recording available soon. Kath talks about why search engine optimization and making sure content that's contained on your website and in your digital channels will help people find you. Content marketing, I guess, can be challenging and a bit time consuming if you don't have a strategy for it. I know that some of these topics and they seem like they're going to take a lot of time, but really if you've got a bit of a plan in place and every month you sit down and you think about what is it that our organisation can and should be sharing to get people to engage or to help people understand what we're doing or to educate, it does become a really straightforward process. It does require planning and some organisation, but once again, there are tools and ways to help you do that. And often it can be as simple as just using a spreadsheet, just to have a think about the types of content and the types of topics that you can share to your audience. So some tips around content marketing: create websites and content that serve your customers' needs and answer questions. It's always about the end person. It's not about the organization. It's always about the person that you're serving. How can you add value? How can you answer questions? How can you help them? Understand who that audience is by creating a persona or an avatar. And I think that's a topic that's come up again and again today, is understanding who that person is. Because once we understand who they are, if they're a busy person who doesn't have a lot of time in their day and we know that they need to consume stuff quickly, then maybe we focus on giving them video content. If they're, a younger demographic, then we know we probably need to have some stuff on Instagram. If they're an older demographic, then we might need to think about doing things like printed newsletters and things like that. So it's just understanding who they are. Give away knowledge and give away lots of it. Often I get asked, well, how much should we give away? How much information do we give versus giving them just a little bit and perhaps keeping it to ourselves? And I can only say that the more you give, the more you get back. So I think as much value as you can offer and as much value as you can add, it's an absolutely fantastic thing. Create a call to action. And even with community-based organisations, we're always wanting people to hopefully take that next step and create an action. So ask. If you don't ask, people won't often follow through, not because they don't want to, but just because it hasn't hit that spot where like, oh, that's what they're asking me to do. Consistently publish new content, and that's what people want to see. Lots of new things coming through all the time. I think it's great to have a think about doing different types of content, and that's where having a bit of a content plan will really help. Not just static photos, but some videos, a bit of behind the scenes. People love behind the scenes. What actually happens in the background of your organisation? Who are the people involved? What kind of makes the machine tick, and why should I get involved? People love that sort of information. And be true to your organisation's voice and tone. It has to feel like it's coming from you. It shouldn't feel like it's coming from someone, a third-party person who's writing for you. It has to feel quite authentic to who your organisation is.
Sarah?
Yes.
One thing that when I was at the Poole Community Gardens the other day, I noticed you guys had the beds in the compost.
Yeah.
You should put on a little video on how you make that compost and at what stage you move it to the next, you move it aside. Things like that are really interesting for people.
Yeah.
They might see, or winter vegetables. Got lots of zucchini, just a recipe for zucchini slice on your website. Something like that, all little bits and pieces. But that was one thing that came to mind when I was there the other day. I'm not a huge gardener, I left that to my parents, but I was interested to know when you guys move the sign and why you moved when you're ready to move the sign. That was a question that came to mind, so that could make a really good little 30-second video.
Especially with the snakes there.
I don't need to know the snake.
So the question, that's all right. So the question from Heather was around, she was recently at the Woolgoolga Community Gardens and watching one of the processes, which is around composting and then what you're doing with the soil and when to move it and then how to make it and all those types of things. And it was really interesting because it's something that Heather hadn't done before. And I think that's a great point. Often one of my top tips to people is whatever the top 10 questions you normally get asked, and every organisation or business gets asked their top 10 questions, how, why, what, when, they make great little videos because most people are thinking about those types of things all the time. And if Heather's thought about it, guaranteed that and numerous other people have thought the same thing. I'd also like to know that. No idea about composting. I'm not great in the garden. So yeah, that's a really good point. Short videos on typical things that you do and common questions is a great way to go about doing it. Email marketing, it's a really important part of building and maintaining communication with potential clients and existing customers. It helps people walk through their journey with you, whether that's as a prospect or someone who's not sure about getting involved with your organisation, or who's someone who's already engaged with your organisation. And doing it really regularly is absolutely of value. As I said, we saw this year when Snapchat went down and the world absolutely freaked out, like, oh my God, how do I suddenly communicate, for those people who are relying on that medium for their primary source of communication. The same thing happens all the time. I've been talking and working with businesses over the last few weeks who are like, suddenly my social media, I'm dropped completely off most channels, and they must have changed something in the background. You're not in control of that. Whilst your constant regular engagers will see you, you don't have control. So email marketing is a really stable, consistent way for people to get information. And yes, there is that whole conversation around, oh, people are sick of getting emails in their inbox. Do you know what? They actually don't mind getting really interesting pieces of information in their inbox. It's when it's not interesting and not valuable and not useful and just full of stuff they don't care about that they'll disengage. But if it's the opposite, people are prepared to open it and read it and engage with it. We're also finding that simplifying the content in your emails is working really well too. So whereas previously a weekly or monthly newsletter might have had lots of information in it, just pick one or two things and send them every 2 weeks instead. It's actually a fantastic way to go about doing things.
So just online, someone's asking, we're considering advertising spend. What do businesses look for or expect from digital marketing efforts?
Look, I think the standard number is about 5 times. So where you're doing it effectively, and there's lots of elements that come into an effective digital spend, and that comes to copy, quality of image, quality of content. But if you're ticking those off and you've really thought about what you're putting out, you should expect somewhere around a 5 times return if you're doing it well. So if you're putting out a Google AdWords campaign or a Facebook campaign that's well executed, that's what you should be looking for. And I guess that's the fantastic thing about digital marketing versus other forms of marketing, say newspaper or radio or anything like that. It should be absolutely measurable. And I think when you're able to review and tweak content as you go, it also means you're in control of what that outcome might look like. So that's kind of an average number, just depending on what it is that you're doing. In terms of, the benefits of email marketing, once again, it's really cost effective. I think for community-based organisations, when budget is limited and finite, finding ways to engage and communicate that don't take a lot of time is absolutely key. You're able to build relationships. It's fast and easy to send. You can segment your database in many ways. There's so many free databases that help you build email lists and send emails out these days where you don't have to figure it out yourself. And you can tag people for different things. So if your organisation has a few different things going on, but everyone's not interested in all of those elements, you can actually start segmenting them and just sending them the things that they want to hear about, which also means that you get better engagement and that people respond a little more effectively. You're maintaining control, and you can really track and analyze who's opening them and what's going on, which is really helpful when you're trying to figure out where to spend your time and money when it comes to communication and digital marketing. Yes, we know that it can take time to build an email database, but I think just chipping away at that is absolutely essential. Having a pop-up on your website so that people can easily subscribe is a great way to do it, and it really does work. Offering a bit of an incentive to do so. Yes, you can risk irritating customers, as we spoke about before, but just don't irritate them. Send them really valuable information and do it, regularly, but not too much as to upset people. People can really easily unsubscribe these days, so I think that's the other thing you'll find. If they're not really engaged in your content, then you can get rid of them. Not get rid of them, they can get rid of you. And likewise, you can start cleaning out your email database for people who haven't engaged, because you don't want to keep sending people information if they're just not opening it. So I think that's also the flip side of maintaining a really healthy email database, is keeping it cleansed and maintaining it all the time as well. So tips for email marketing. Start tracking what's working really well and what doesn't, and you can do that with those tools that we've spoken about. Find the right balance. I think that the emails you send to people who might be interested versus those who are engaged look very different, so do try and send different types of emails if you can, and invest in a good platform. And that doesn't mean money, but it does mean time. I know lots of organizations who are using things like HubSpot, which is a free tool that you can do lots of different things with. You don't need to spend money until you want to start doing, quite sophisticated digital marketing things, which most community-based organizations won't need to do, but free tools to start with. In terms of social media marketing, absolutely something that we're finding community-based organizations are needing to consider. They provide really large networks that are quite difficult to reach through traditional marketing. Social media also really encourages interaction and connection. And I think if you're using these channels to do that, not just push, but to listen and engage and connect and comment, they work really well. They're undeniably fantastic for brand awareness, and they allow you to target very, very specific people and groups. So where you're wanting to put on an event, perhaps a music event on a weekend and it's a local community, you can put some information out, and you can really target people within your area who are of a certain age group and share it specifically to them. Whereas trying to do that via mailer or hoping they see it in the newspaper or even hear it on radio can be quite hit and miss. I know that certainly when we were running Botanica, the event that we put on late last year, social media was absolutely one of our most important channels that we had running. We knew that we could create beautiful content that looked really interesting to get people interested enough to go to the website. And that's often the most important thing with social media, is that you're getting people curious and aware so that they come and they hit your website and they find out more information. So I think it's just something, even in its most basic form, that we should be thinking about. In terms of how often do you post, I'm not sure if we get to that here, but I would say minimum sort of 3 times a week is probably the target that you're looking for, just so that you're keeping consistent and in people's channels and top of mind. As we've said, the pros for organic social media marketing is that it makes us really accessible and it keeps people in the loop. I know for a lot of people in the area, when they want to know what's going on or they want to find out about something, they'll jump on things like Facebook. They'll find the organisation and they'll just see if they've got things listed. So have you got your event listed? Can they find out when you're open or when you're not open? And people are using social media for that more than ever. So even just for basic information. It's great because it allows you to react and respond in real time. So people are very comfortable and happy to jump on Facebook direct messenger or whichever channel it is, and ask questions. It's really important that someone's monitoring those and coming back, because it just gives that extra appearance of connection and lets people know that there's someone else on the other end of that organisation who's listening and who's keeping in touch. It does nurture brand loyalty and gives you a really consistent and relevant presence, regardless of which sort of age group that you're working with. The stats around Facebook are pretty amazing in terms of the demographics, and I think that you'll find even up to 65, 70 years old, the age population who are very, very comfortable with Facebook is quite amazing. So it's not a young person's channel by any stretch. It really does span across all age groups. And I absolutely know my mum, she's on it all the time. She loves it. It can be really inexpensive if managed well too. So really, as long as you are providing a consistent and professional channel and that you're providing relevant information, it doesn't cost a lot of money. In terms of the negative sides of social media marketing, it can be hard to break through noise if there's a lot going on, but I think just playing to your own strengths and being consistent and not necessarily worrying about what anyone else is doing is really important. It does take time and it does take a little bit of consistent effort to manage a social media channel. It's not really something that you can set and forget. It doesn't work well if you're going to post something at the start of a month and then not look at it till the end of the month and not respond and not do anything about it. It's not the channel for you and it won't work. Reach can decline based on algorithms, but I think that's just where having different types of content and not only relying on social media is important. So making sure that you are doing other things, your website looks great, you do have some idea about the way Google's interacting and you've got some keywords on your website that are helping people find you, and you are working with things like email databases as well. So don't only rely on social media. So our tips, identifying goals and your target audience before getting started, choosing the right platforms for your industry or customers, consumers, community base, regularly posting new content and information, thinking about what your customers want to know. So I think this is the other thing that's really important to consider is putting yourself in the shoes of the people who you're trying to engage with. If you were wanting to engage with your organisation, what is it that you'd want to know? What are the things that you think are the pain points or they're trying to discover? And if you pop yourself in that person's shoes, it's really interesting to think about the types of content and the information that you want to share. And as always, think and review content before posting. It's just part and parcel of social. Now, paid social is a whole different thing, and I guess it's a whole new world of advertising, and certainly for businesses that I work with on a day-to-day basis and organisations, the days of, and I talked about this the other day, spray and pray are kind of gone. And spray and pray is that you throw some stuff out there, you put it, whatever it may be, and then you hope that people respond. And that often is traditional media, the way that works. In this day and age, we can really target and use funds and drive traffic and drive engagement in a way that you can measure. And I think for any business, whether it's a community-based organisation or a for-profit organisation, that's what you want. There's nothing worse. We all know that we only have a finite budget for things. It's really understanding, is it working? If it's working, why is it working? How can I re-engage these people again? Paid social media really gives the opportunity to do that. So in terms of our pros, you're reaching an audience where they already are. And what that means is we know how much time people are spending on social media, most people, because now you get your little stats on your phone, most people do, about how much screen time you've had. So if you know that your audience is in a demographic that does spend time on Facebook, and you can understand which times they spend on Facebook from the information that you get on your account, what days and what times they're mostly on there, you know that they're there. It really gives you a way to connect with them at the place where they're at. paid ads are really becoming more part of a regular feed now. They're not feeling like paid advertising. And I think if they're done well, advertising doesn't have to say buy me. Advertising can be engage. Here's how we're helping the community. Here's some interesting information that you might be interested in. It doesn't have to be salesy. We can segment ads in many ways. And I think once you go through and you look at how many segments there are when you're looking to do social media, paid social media advertising, it's quite incredible how small a bracket you can get to. You can pick age, demographic, job, what the people like. It's quite incredible. So being able to do that is very helpful when you're trying to advertise. Affordability, you can also get quite a lot of bang for your buck. And even if you're just doing simple things like boosting a post, so where you may have an event or a particular post on something that's doing quite well and you can simply boost it, it really does give you a very cost-effective way to reach a specific type of audience. Paid social media obviously does have its cons. I think, you know, there's a whole world to learn around paid advertising, and sometimes that does seem quite complicated. LinkedIn ads can be expensive. Yes, there's talk about privacy and bombarding people with information, but I think really understanding who your audience is, being very mindful about the way that you push information to them and finding the right channel to do it, it does really work. And I would also say perhaps getting some help. The hard thing is understanding how to use all these tools, but perhaps having someone to just help you set up one or two small campaigns that you can run again and again might be a really cost-effective way and an effective way to reach a specific audience. So in terms of tips, let's understand which platforms really resonate with your audience, and organic posts are brilliant. We can probably see which channels are performing better just by the engagement from your normal organic posting. Refine your goals so you know where to post. Understand what you're trying to do. As I said, whether that's promoting something, whether it's an event, whether it's promoting your brand, there's different considerations to make, and that will also impact which channels that you use. And once again, use interactive videos. Video ads do certainly do much better than static content. I'm not going to jump in too much to search engine optimization, but basically search engine optimization is just a way that search engines trawl your digital footprint, which looks like your website, your social media, whether you're on YouTube, all of those things, and helps people find you. So the more understanding that you have about the content on those platforms, making sure it is easy to find you, that the messaging is clear, that there's not a lot of noise on those things, that once people hit your site, they know who you are, what you do, how to engage. That's absolutely critical. It is a really fantastic way to make sure that people can find you. And I think that once again, as I mentioned, Kath Fowler did a fantastic session on search engine optimization. And I think if that's something that is of interest to you and your organization, then jump on and have a look at that. And absolutely put that into your digital marketing plan as a priority, and have a think about how to manage that and go about doing it. In terms of tips, I think, you know, there's a whole lot of things that you can do in terms of organic ranking. So the way that your website is structured, being linked to other reputable websites, understanding what keywords are, which means how do people search for you? Community gardens will Google. Do you come up number one? And if you don't come up number one on that list, why is it? Perhaps it's just the information on your website's not clear enough to direct people there. So just understanding what your keywords are and working with people, once again, getting help to make sure your website's set up well, that it is fast, it's not too clunky, that it works well on a mobile device. All of those things will help with your search engine optimization. Things like guest blogs on industry websites, and this might be a little bit left field, but I think when we're thinking about digital marketing and social, finding ways to really connect in and get traction and audience in other places is really important. And I know when there's not a lot of time and money and budget, how do we perhaps reach other audiences that might be quite like the people we're trying to reach for our community-based organisation? How do we connect with other groups and share information? And it may be that within the Coffs Coast, within our region, there are other community organisations or websites that you can share your expert advice, opinion, tips on gardening that will actually connect people back to you and say, oh, that sounds really interesting. I should go and check that out. It's just another way of getting your content in your name and the organisation out there. Obviously, it helps build credibility. It helps you provide different information back to your website, and it also helps with your Google ranking. It can be challenging to find the right places. So I think, yeah, just make sure that you are reaching out to people, reputable organisations, and that they perhaps definitely have the same type of audience and target that you do, and really understand what they're trying to do before you get involved. Yeah, let's do some research and just making sure that their goals align with yours. So a lot of information to cover off there. But the key things to remember, I think, who is your target audience, finding out where they hang out, understanding what your objective is and the key messages that you want to convey. Be consistent. When it comes to social media, choose 2 to 3 channels that are going to work for you. Use technology to help you and put your hand up and get help where you're not sure, because you can waste and spend a lot of time trying to figure these things out by yourself. Whereas if you get a little bit of help to get set up at the start, it can make a really big difference. Is there any questions around social media, digital platforms? Ash?
Just quickly, with Instagram, do you think it's important to keep your actual page quite fresh? Like to say, like after 6 months or so, going back into like, as you post something and saving as images to sort of refresh the back end of Instagram. Do you think that's important?
I don't. I think people have moved on, and I think Instagram is one of those, it's a highly visual, and the people will most likely never go back into your full account and scroll through what happened 6 months ago, unless you're only posting once a month, then maybe. But I think if it's if you're keeping quite up to date, then no, I don't think you need to. You can also kind of reuse some of that old content if it's been a year or so before, and I think that's something that people don't often do. If you know, a lot happens in the space of a year in social media. So there might be some really good stuff that you can reuse and recycle and perhaps tweak a little bit if there's already content there. But no, I think for Instagram, it's highly visual. So if that was going to be one of your key channels, just making sure that images are fresh and new and that you're constantly putting new things up that look like your brand and that are a little bit consistent is absolutely the key. But it's a great way to visually share what your organisation is about. For the Woolgoolga community gardens, you could absolutely use Instagram, and it could just be about all of the fruit and vegetables and flowers and plants and stuff going on, and you could just share that all the time, and that would be enough. You know, it doesn't have to be a full conversation all the time on Instagram. That can just be a visual representation of what's happening.
We've got an account, but I've never put anything up there. Some stuff's gone up there through another channel.
Yeah.
And I've never really gone there to see if it's worth our while to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, yeah, plants, new vegetables growing, people in the garden, that's enough just to share and to tag. So it's really just about pictures, and the more you can tag within those things, which means mentioning people who might be there and who are involved, it also goes out to their channels. So there's this fantastic flow-on effect with social media that where you're mentioning other people, or you're working with other businesses or organizations, or you're mentioning particular people who are involved, it then also flows out to their channels too. So suddenly it's not only the people in your stream who are getting it, but a whole other part of the community.
There's a question online saying, what are the approximate costs? I'm not sure, yeah, they're referring to Instagram or...
Yeah, look, it's a great,
It's
it's a $1 million question. And it absolutely depends on what you're trying to get out of it. You know, there is no magic number. It may be that you are looking to promote a specific event because you're wanting to raise tickets, ticket sales. So in that instance, you may understand that if you put $100 into a campaign for that event, then the expectation is you get this much out in terms of ticket sales. So it really will depend on the objective and also on your budget. You know, we totally understand that community organisations don't have a huge budget for these types of things. So really understanding what the key purpose is. Are we trying to get new members in? Are we trying to sell an event? Are we trying to get some brand awareness out? Once you understand what the objective is, then it's much easier to talk about how much the spend should be based on the size of the target audience that you're looking to promote to, based on the expected action that you want them to take. It will definitely depend. But for most advertising campaigns that I'm involved with, somewhere between a $50 and a $200 spend is more than enough to get a great outcome, depending on what you're looking to do. I know that when we ran Botanica, we had a significantly higher budget for social media and social media advertising because we had a short space of time and we had one key event that we wanted to get people to. So we might have spent somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 on a couple of campaigns that ran consistently in the background to keep things going. I think also potentially having a brand awareness campaign that you might spend $20 or $30 a month on for your organization is also a really great way to go, because what that does is it keeps targeting people within your specific audience that you've defined, and it gives them a little insight and a little campaign and lets them link to your website. And sometimes that might be enough for something that runs in the background with the other activities that you're doing to get some more attraction and awareness. So that might be something to consider. All right, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for sticking around on a Friday afternoon. Hopefully you found some information in there that was useful. Please reach out to me if you have any questions after this. And once again, thank you to 6 Degrees and to Council for putting on these great events.